You've probably heard terms like shadow work, inner child work, and even dark night of the soul in coaching spaces. And those terms sound deep and they're intriguing and maybe even give people a little bit of that woo-woo. But here's the thing. Behind the hashtags and the Instagram therapists, there is actual real psychology here. And in today's episode, I'm breaking down a few things. Number one, what these concepts actually mean from a psychological standpoint, because those of you who've been tuning in know I have over a decade of experience as a licensed trauma therapist. I'm going to be bringing that into today's episode. Number two, the origins of parts work, which is what these Instagram hashtags are really talking about. This is a concept that stems from internal family systems, IFS therapy. I'm going to be talking about that today. Number three, we're going to go over how to responsibly integrate these elements into your coaching without overstepping your boundaries or operating outside of your scope. And then the fourth thing is I am going to give you some tangible tools that you can start using in your sessions that stem from this work with the right clients. So if this is something that intrigues you or that you're already doing, definitely listen to today's episode because you do have a responsibility with this type of work. That's why before coaching, and still to this day and forevermore, there will also be therapy, which does require graduate level education, training, and licenses and continuing education. And I don't say that to scare you, right? But to be real, that this type of work is deep and it's vulnerable. And there is some inherent risk because it takes people into contact with parts of themselves that they've hidden or repressed, sometimes for decades or longer because they didn't have the awareness, and sometimes for good reasons, or the skill sets or the support or the safety to face them. And these psychological parts that I'm talking about today aren't imaginary. We might not be able to differentiate them or see them physically, but neuroscience and trauma research done by Vandercook and Siegel and etc., they show that our nervous system adapts to these early life events. Some are good, some are bad. And what ends up happening is that we start to create these mental and emotional patterns to keep us safe. Keep that word in mind throughout today's episode. I think it will be helpful. Patterns. But here's the catch. That pattern that protected you at age 8 might be limiting you at age 38. So again, when I talk about parts, I want you to think about patterns. And each part is just a group of patterns. Patterns around the way that you think, you feel, and you behave that served you at one point, but might be hurting you now. And if you're a coach, it's important to learn how to identify these patterns, whether a client can name them or not, and create space for your clients to relate differently to them, not get rid of them. That's another thing we're going to talk about today. Learn to relate and communicate and build a healthier relationship with those parts. That is going to be a game changer and set them up for a transformation inside of your coaching container. Another thing I want to talk about before we dive in is debunking this one myth that I hear all the time. And what it is that your personality is not this unified, fixed self, okay? Modern psychology suggests that it's actually made up of many different parts, each with their own mode and identity and pattern and subpersonality that formed in response to a particular life season, event, or challenge. And like I mentioned before, the reason we want to be mindful of bringing this work into our coaching is because sometimes these parts developed during very difficult and a lot of times traumatic times. And they might have been brilliant survival strategies back then that were super age appropriate and helpful. Some common ones are like hyper independence or perfectionism or people pleasing. But now they might be keeping your clients small, reactive, misaligned, or stagnant in their growth. And often clients aren't consciously aware of these parts. They're usually hidden because a lot of clients have shame and judgment and criticism around those parts of themselves because they label them as bad or weak. And sometimes they're suppressed completely because it's too hard to face until they burst out in ways that clients regret and then shame themselves even more. And if this isn't making sense yet, hang on. I promise you that you will understand this theory and how to appropriately integrate it in your coaching by the end of this episode. So let's go ahead and get into it. Parts work. This was designed by Dr. Richard Schwartz. Again, it is stemming from the internal family systems model, IFS therapy. And what that does is it gives us language and processes for engaging with these sub-personalities, these psychological patterns. By the way, this is the framework that I am going to be teaching from today. I'm not going to be talking about the IG buzzwords or the TikTok therapy and the inner child and shadow work. And no shame if you're using that language, but I really try to bring in science-backed tools and tangible techniques to you guys on this podcast, in my program, The Art and Skill of Coaching, and in my one-on-one coaching to ensure that the coaching being provided is quality. So that's my little tangent. Let's go ahead and dive back in. So IFS organizes parts into 3 main categories. Now, this isn't an exhaustive list or all the parts that could exist for you or your client, but for the purpose of coaching, we're going to talk about these 3 main ones. They are called the exiles, the managers, and the firefighters. Okay, so number 1, the exiles. These are usually the wounded parts of you. These are the vulnerable parts. These are the parts that you hold shame or pain or fear around, okay? Then you have the managers. These are the protectors of the exiles. They were developed to keep that pain buried, to protect that vulnerable part of you so that you don't get hurt again. But they usually end up having controlling behaviors such as perfectionism or overachievement. Then you have the firefighters. These are the reactive parts that will come in and distract you from the pain through usually impulsive or numbing behaviors, okay? They're here to put out the fire, and it doesn't matter how it gets done, it just gets done. So let's talk about how to use this in coaching responsibly. While IFS is outside of the scope of coaching, we can weave elements of parts awareness and compassion into our coaching work to help clients expand their self-understanding. Let me give you an example of what might be appropriate. Let's say you're coaching a corporate leader and they receive some constructive criticism from a senior executive and they suddenly shrink. And it's totally out of character because this individual is confident, charismatic, they're a leader, but they become defensive and insecure and self-doubting. And that shrinking is likely an exile part rooted in early experiences of not feeling good enough that got triggered and is coming out to play. So let me give you a tangible coaching tool that could be appropriate. It's called Meet the Part, and it has 4 easy steps. So step number 1 would be to notice and name. So when you start to see that as the coach, because a lot of times the client's not going to be aware of it, you invite them to notice what's happening in your body, what's happening in your mind. Maybe you probe them with something like, it sounds like there's a part of you that's feeling small and criticized and that you're getting a little defensive right now. Can we talk about that? Right? So that would be step 1, notice and name. Then step 2 is you want to separate the self from the part. Again, that part is just an aspect of their personality with its own set of patterns. And you want to reinforce that this is just a part of them. It's not all of them. Then you want to move to step 3, which is curious compassion. And that's as simple as just asking, hey, if you were to speak to that part that you just separated from self, what would you want to know about why it's here? Why is it showing up? What is it needing right now? Which can lead you into step 4, which is update the story or narrative. And in this step, you want to help the client build compassion through building understanding, helping them see that this part was once protective, and explore what it might need now so that it can calm down and let the wise version of you, the grown version of you, come and take the lead. I hope that you can hear in the way that I'm presenting this is that we're not judging the part. We're not trying to get rid of the part, but instead what we're doing here is we're noticing it and we're giving it space and compassion and understanding and trying to change the relationship and the communication between that part and the version of you today. Okay, so again, these 4 steps are notice and name, separate the self from the part, curious compassion around the part, and then update the story. And even with this light and simple approach, you can start to foster integration of those parts without crossing into the therapy territory. I also teach an advanced intervention for parts work inside of my coach certification, The Art and Skill of Coaching. It goes a little bit deeper. It's trauma informed. It's still within the scope of coaching, but if you want more information on that, I'll go ahead and throw a link in the show notes so you can learn a little bit more about our upcoming class. But let me give you one more example to really bring this home. Let's say you have a high achieving client that is procrastinating on launching their program. And after doing some exploratory coaching with them, you might discover through that process that there's a little bit of perfectionism going on, which is a manager part that is there to prevent them from feeling the shame that exile, that vulnerable part carries around failure or not being good enough or making a mistake. And once you can see this, you can coach the client on creating supportive conditions where both parts feel safe. And when you can acknowledge those parts and use that 4-step process I just talked about, that can actually create really good work and lead to a sustainable, aligned action plan. And when you bring this type of work into the coaching, clients become more integrated, meaning they have greater self-awareness, less judgment and shame, more choice in how they're responding versus reacting with these parts, and they have access to fuller emotional range without getting hijacked emotionally and mentally by these parts, by these psychological patterns. And when you can help a client meet themselves, their full selves, with compassion instead of criticism, you're not just solving a presenting problem, you're giving them tools for every future challenge. So if this resonated with you, I would encourage you to start with your own exploration. Maybe read the book, No Bad Parts by Dr. Schwartz. Maybe journal for yourself first around parts that you've disowned. What are your exiles? And notice how you can approach them with curiosity instead of shame by building understanding and compassion. Then maybe try the Meet the Parts exercise, those 4 steps for yourself or with a trusted client who has really great self-awareness and really good coping skills, okay, to see how you can take that coaching deeper with the right clients. And again, if this type of coaching is something that you enjoy and want to add to your toolbox, you would love the Art and Skill of Coaching. This is an advanced level coach training program for individuals who want to up-level the coaching they're providing and utilize evidence-based interventions that are based in psychology and peak performance to get their clients real results fast and that last. We run 2 certifications a year, usually a spring and a fall class. Our wait list for our fall class is open right now. I'll go ahead and throw the link in the show notes. Definitely hop on there to stay up to date on important details regarding our next class and goodies that are only available to our wait list. And if you found this episode helpful, please leave us a review or share it with another coach. Your support helps more coaches and more clients get tangible, science-backed tools to help them change their lives. So make sure that you share, like, and subscribe so you never miss another episode to help you master the art and skill of coaching.